What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. A lot of stuff all the time. It seems like that's how I start every show now. But I've been continuing to work on the multi-bingo. That has been proceeding well. In fact, I just finished up the very last 25 hole games that I had left to do. Those were Gaiety and Gay Time. And for those of you who might have been listening for a long time, those two games are the only two Magic Pockets games that Bally produced. The Magic Pockets is a feature in Bingo Pinball that allows you to kick the balls left and right as long as they're within the top row, so the numbers 1 through 7. This feature was never used again on any of the other alternate playfields, like the 20-hole, the 18-hole, any of those. So it's specific to those two games, and those were the last 25-hole ones I had to complete, and they are now done. I've moved on to the 20 holes, and more about those in a minute, but before that, I mentioned last episode that there were some protections that I needed to make to the unit itself. The Magic Pockets unit is very hard to find, and I was incredibly lucky to get a hold of one and install it on my spare Gaiety playfield that I had. However, I've been very concerned about destroying that unit because there's no replacement, and there's no way to really fix any of the kickover claws if they break. So unlike a standard kickout or a game like, say, Gottlieb's Sing-Along, where you have a kickout that feeds to another kickout, these are much more accurate. It's these large metal claws which extend out and basically place the ball into the next hole. It's really cool to see, very unusual and unique, but there's a problem. The way that it works, there are two different coils, both very powerful, 120 volt coils, and when those are pulsed, it will push all the balls to the left or right. All well and good, but what happens if, in my computer-controlled environment, somebody presses both the left and right buttons at the same time? It's possible that the left and right claws could reach up and smash into each other. Do that enough, and one will break. So I don't want that to happen. And so I've been very cautious about it. The way that I set up my code to handle that, I set up my game to work very similarly to the way the original game works, and that's to exercise a delay relay. Now, this delay relay is a virtual relay. It's not real in my game, but what it does is it locks out that button for approximately 2 seconds and gives the balls a chance to travel and the coils to release before checking the state of the holes and seeing if there's a ball in holes 1 through 7, because it could have traveled down the playfield, or anything could happen. And then it will allow you to pulse either the opposite side, again locking it out, or the same side, continuing to move it left or right. In the PyProc game framework, the way this works is through a delay method. So there's a built-in way to handle something that needs to happen in the future, which is very clever, and I use that all over the place for different things, from rendering the graphics, since I'm doing it outside of the default way to render the graphics, to something like this, where I need to ensure the state of a relay changes after a certain period of time. This is similar to the types of relays used in 1970s Bally games for handling tilt, especially multiplayers, where there is a 455 flash lamp that goes across the hold switch in the coil for the tilt relay, and it will keep that tilt relay engaged until enough current bleeds into the lamp to change its state to on, and then it'll not have enough current to power both and drop the relay. So basically, it holds that relay closed for 2 seconds and then lets it go, and then that's what allows you to move it back and forth. Hopefully that's not too super technical. But that wasn't enough for my peace of mind, because it works on my test machine, my development machine, but that's not to say that I couldn't plug it in and then have missed something and then smash a roo. So I ended up emailing, I've mentioned before, with one of the custom pinball development folks. His name is Michael Ocean. He is incredibly helpful, and I'm very thankful for his time. He took a look at my code. He said that should work, so I'm very excited. Getting that second opinion means a lot, and again, I'm very thankful for his time. So thank you, Michael, and hope you get to come check it out at some point. Hopefully I'll be in your neck of the woods or vice versa at some point. So, delay relays aside, what else has been going on? I mentioned I started work on the 20-hole games. This is the largest collection of games I have left to implement. I have only 20 games left until I'm finished, with my first pass at least, of every game. I have an additional 5 games listed that are the card-themed games, which are kind of novelties, kind of not novelties, things like Bally's Twin Joker, and they use an alternate playfield layout. So I'm not sure if I'm going to implement them here in this first pass or not. I need a playfield that will fit. The playfield for Twin Joker in particular is too wide to go in a standard bingo pinball cabinet, at least to my eye. I could be wrong. Certainly haven't taken a measuring tape to it, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those yet, and whether or not they should be part of this project or a different one. I would like to include them, but if the geometry doesn't work, if I can't ensure a consistent play experience, then I'd rather leave them out than implement them and make it so that it's not fun to play them. That would be a shame, in my opinion, because there's a couple of really beautiful games in there, like Williams Yukon, that I've been over in the podcast before. But, we'll see what happens. And in other news, I've also gotten a little further on Robo-Frenzy. Beloved comics artist Ryan Clater and I sat down together. We had the opportunity during a much-needed and wonderful vacation, during which we both got to go down with our families and enjoy Flippers Arcade. And do yourself a favor if you're heading down that way and go to Flippers. It's, I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but it's a fantastic place to play pinball. It's the owner's collection of games, and they are wonderful. They all play very well, and great attention is paid to the upkeep of the games and the location. It's really quite wonderful. And it's a great location, too. It's right on your way to the Outer Banks before you hit the big bridge. So you can hit it going there and coming back, and even better, they have gas. So if you need to fuel up on your way back from vacation, you can do that. Stop in, play some pinball, and have a good time. I was fortunate enough to meet the owner, David, as well as one of his techs, Eddie. And hello to you both if you're listening. Had a great time. Really enjoyed getting to meet you all and getting to play your game. So thanks very much. And they were very busy. They were getting ready to load up to go to SFGE. So kudos to them for bringing all those games and sharing them with the public. Again, check out Flippers Arcade down in Grandy, North Carolina. So Ryan and I sat down to discuss Robo-Frenzy and the current state of that game. Where we left off, Ryan had wanted to design a new cabinet that would have an interesting profile, something that would look more like a physical robot. And this was in the Robo-Frenzy thread. We'd been talking about that. Of course, I, with my super cheap nature, had suggested that we not do that. It seems like I'm always naysaying. But in this case, there were some practical concerns when we sat down and actually talked about it. With the design that he was thinking of, there might have been issues with play control, because the bump outs in the cabinet, you might have run your hands into them if you were in a spirited mode. So, what we're going to try is to use a standard penny pitch size cabinet. And thankfully Ryan has one of those games, and he was able to measure for me. So this Sunday, which happens to be Father's Day, I'll pick up some plywood and go to town. We'll see what I can build and if I'm actually able to accomplish anything this Sunday, but that's kind of the goal. I'll be taking my customary blurry and too dark pictures as I go, so you can follow along. And once the cabinet's built, in BASIC, then I'll start populating with units. Everything has to be mounted in such a way that it's serviceable, and I have plenty of ideas about that. So I'll be working on that, and that may require that I build out a different size cabinet. Now, the way the cabinet's constructed is actually very simple. Thanks to some photos that Ryan provided, I saw that the penny pitch cabinet is basically just finish nailed together. So it's really no joinery that needs to be made. So it should be really simple to make that thing, but we'll see. The back door, I plan to use bingo style hinges. Again, I have lots of thoughts about serviceability, and bingo style hinges for the back door means that you can actually pull the back door off and set it down somewhere to work on the relays inside. That should be very helpful to your back if you're working on the game for a long period of time, 30 years from now or much farther into the future, long after I'm gone. So I still have the custom controls to get made, along with the gearing and so forth that I need to order, but I need to have the actual physical unit in front of me so that I can take accurate measurements. Of course, those are key when you're talking about things like gearing. I want to make sure that stuff actually turns when it's supposed to. And again, that it's serviceable. It won't do any good if I have this monstrosity set up so that there's no way to work on it. I need to have enough space for, the coin box, isolation between units so that if a piece falls, it's not going to short out everything in the game. Those kind of things. Still taking the project slowly. I don't want to get burned out again. I feel like I'm just turning the corner on my last session of burnout. Really diving back into the code has helped quite a bit on that for me. So once that's finished and I feel like I've got things in a relatively playable state, it'll allow me to pause and really focus a lot of time and attention on the other hobby projects I got going on. So I'm looking forward to that. And in other news, the Orc Show is right around the corner, it feels like. It's at the very end of September, I believe the 29th and 30th. And it's about that time. We need to start rallying together for the bingo row and see who might be bringing what. I plan to bring at least 2 games this year, and I'm going to start reaching out to the other bingo collectors and see if anybody can bring some stuff, and we'll go from there. If you haven't been out before, this will be the 3rd year that we'll be doing the bingo row at the White Rose Game Room Show. This is the 1st year with the restored cabinet on the multi-bingo, and it will have almost all of the bingos ever produced, and some that haven't been, all in one cabinet. I'm undecided on how many playfields I'll be bringing, or if I'll be bringing alternate playfields. The majority of the games can be played with a single playfield, so I may just bring that standard playfield again, but we'll see. It's a little ways away, and I can certainly be convinced. So if there's something that you want to play, let me know, and I'll be sure to bring the appropriate playfield for that as long as I have it. There's a couple that I do not have at the moment, but I have most everything in the works in some way or another. So, in the multi, some of the treats include United Serenade, which was only discovered this year, and the entire United complement is already in the multi. And then, again, all the 25-hole Bally Bingos ever produced, and at least one that wasn't, is in there. And the Williams Bingo, and all the Keeney Bingos. So, come on down, give it a shot, let me know what you think. And then play some of the other fine traditional bingos that are there in Bingo Row. Okay, so other things that are happening, and I think I've mentioned before, doing this show on a 2-week schedule is actually kind of rough for me because it's hard to keep all the news straight unless it happened that day. That was kind of the advantage of doing a daily show, but life is a balance. In the multi-bingo thread on Pinside, a user, Kate001, asked some really great questions about the project and about things that I found specifically in the circuitry of the different games. For example, one of the questions, how many different playfields would you need to play a majority of the games? And I responded, 1. Over 100 games can be played with the standard 25-hole playfield. You miss out on some really cool features, but if you swap that standard 25-hole playfield for a hold feature playfield with 25 holes and rollovers, of which there's only 2, Surf Club or Ice Frolics, you get another 3 games on top of the over 100 because you can play all the hold feature games. As far as the size of the game, that was another question, you can make it as small as you like. You could even make a scale model of the playfield if you choose. I'm providing all the documentation to wire up Jones plugs and the cabinet wiring. You'll be able to scale it up or down and do exactly as I've done fairly easily. Another question. In your examination of the portioning mechanisms, have you found any features that might have been secretly lucrative for a player? Like some double or nothing circuits that actually gave greater than 50% odds? My response? Well, the Reflex really handles portioning of the double or nothing in all double or nothing games, and none of the games had that precisely documented until last month. I mentioned that I need to go back and review my implementation to make sure it's correct, now that documentation is out there. And thank you to Phil Hooper and the generous fellow who did that documentation, credited as Steve Testa on Phil's site. What I've found is that there's some features that are very lucrative for a player that require a crazy amount of fortuitous positioning to achieve. Several mixers, spotting disc, and lack of certain other features are required. However, these features should be difficult to achieve. They give a gigantic advantage. There are very, very few unfair things, though. In fact, all the games I've worked on so far, I can only recall one that had a funky method for preventing odd steps. As far as secretly lucrative, I can't think of one. Many of the features, like the magic screen, were quite obviously lucrative and usually required several coins in order to achieve. These machines had a ton of analysis and testing done before leaving the factory. Certain games, like the Twist specifically, are very lucrative for the player. It's very easy to qualify jumps and odds or the feature. In fact, on the Twist, they're guaranteed jumps. Every coin gives you a jump of some kind or another. The feature was only used on this game, and it's very, very powerful. The magic cards that work like the magic screen and actually change the layout of the bingo card. I suspect that the idea was killed before it had the chance to take off because it was hampered by the weird coin setup. One exception to this rule is the United side. I think their games are incredibly liberal with guaranteed features per coin. They address this by making odds more difficult to achieve. It all balances out, but in different ways if you follow. The Reflex was an incredible portioning device well ahead of its time. It was very simple in its construction, but the flexibility it allowed operators that understood it was incredible. If the game was too stingy, they could change an adjustment plug or the gearing on the Reflex to make it more liberal. If the game was too liberal, they could do the opposite. What I've found above all thus far is that the games were well balanced to take your money, yes, but to provide a large amount of entertainment for your nickels. At least, as they left the factory. So Vic chimed in and asked what happens when you disconnect coils from the reflex. Do features light up easier and extra balls? And my response was that almost all the portioning runs through part of the reflex unit. If you disconnect the step-up coil with the unit stepped all the way down, the majority of portioning will bypass the Mixer 1 reflex combination. The reflex is additive, but when stepped all the way down, it allows for 50 volts to completely bypass the initial portioning. You still have to make it through the typically 2 other mixers and the spotting disc to achieve an odds reward, for example. Extra balls also generally have to go through 2 mixers and the spotting disc. Features will be much easier to achieve as they generally only go through 1 additional mixer in the spotting disc. This only applies to Bally games, though. United Games went through 3 distinct phases with their portioning. Most of their games were produced with a dual reflex. One could be reset inside the coin door and the other moved in a different way, and operates more like a mixer, if I recall correctly. The first reflex needs to be able to move for that reason, but the second could be disconnected in the reset position and you would get most of the benefit of a Bally game. Another question from Kate001. In a game like Surf Club, what's it called when you add a credit and the game randomly gives you a feature, a teaser, or just flashes and does nothing? I always assumed that was done somewhat unfairly to make things harder to get. My response, I call that the coin flash. The game never has to do anything. I don't think it's unfair per se. Bingo Pinball is a contest of wills, human versus machine. The machine never has to provide any step up of any unit beyond the guaranteed ones. For your money, you get the coin flash animation and that's all you can expect. Many times the game happens to land in the appropriate position to give you an increase in your odds or award towards a feature. This portioning is actually very controlled despite running through all these different mechanical units. Each game is 100% different for this reason. Take 4 nickels and put them in any game and each will behave a little differently. But the beauty is that occasionally you'll get a double, triple jump in odds from the extra step unit, or a run to the top on extra balls or a feature. It's all dependent on how the last person played the game, how you're playing, and how the machine happens to land on each of those critical units. As far as unfair, I did think of something. Some of the games, Magic Screen and later, had a Mixer 2 or Mixer 4 relay that would engage when portioning was allowed to pass through the mixer. That relay shuts off when the units are in certain positions and will absolutely stop your otherwise easily awarded feature from coming up. Somewhere during the 20-hole games, the behavior of Mixer 4 relay was changed so that when it was engaged, no portioning could pass through. I'm not there yet, but that's how my double-up behaved. I think this is relatively unfair for some value of unfair. It's part of the game and was a way to change the percentage of frequency of step-up, so I don't personally consider this unfair. That's kind of the other problem. I almost have blinders onto that stuff since I've been so deep in it for so long now. And I mentioned these questions are awesome and are making me stretch my brain a bit. Another question. Are you talking about teaser lights that go on, but you're not yet awarded a feature when you mention increase your odds or awards toward a feature? I always wondered if those teaser lights coming on actually meant your odds toward that feature were increasing, or if they were just there to dazzle and distract the player. If I put a coin in and nothing ends up happening after the coin flash, are there internal feature odds that might also be potentially increasing, even if nothing turns on with that credit? And I said, yep. The stepper unit that controls, say, a super card will light those teasers as it steps. The feature is only awarded on step number 4. For games with a selection feature unit, a time tree, the teaser arrows show what position the time tree will be in once the magic screen is awarded. The next question, can a feature step all the way right away or multiple times at once? And if so, curious as to how rare an occurrence the multiple steps would be. And my response, this is where game-to-game specifics come in. Bally implemented a set of switches on the mixer and spotting disc unit called the 16-pulse cam switches. These switches allow for multiple steps when the spotting disc and other portioning fall in line. Each game with stepper-controlled features, a typical example is extra balls, has a possibility of multiple steps. In the case of extra balls, it's possible to put in a nickel and get it to run to the top, also known as awarding all 3 extra balls on 1 nickel or button press. But it's highly, highly, highly unlikely it'll happen. But it's a possibility. More likely you'll get a run to number 2. More likely than that, you'll get a run to number 1. And most likely, you'll get the guaranteed single step lighting first. The portioning is fairly tightly controlled on multiple steps. In my run-to-the-top extra ball example, despite normal portioning that runs through typically 2 mixers and landing on a single rivet on the spotting disc, an additional check or checks are performed through the reflex and or mixer 3 or 4, depending on the game. The reflex has to be in an almost completely liberal position, and the mixer typically has a handful or less rivets that allow pass-through. Hopefully that illustrates how difficult that would be. Stars have to align pretty heavily. It's still possible, though. The bummer from a player's perspective is that it's invisible, so putting in your 40th nickel to try and get the 3rd extra ball gets you a run to the top after your first 2 extra balls are already awarded. Big deal. Bally provided an operator adjustment plug to allow operators to set how frequently single or multiple steps would come up. It added additional rivets on the spotting disc. I have my game set in the least liberal position, and it still comes up frequently enough that I'm concerned I've misread that part of the portioning. But I do stuff in testing like putting in 1,000 coins and observing every part to ensure portioning is working properly. So at least I have some relative idea of how frequently stuff is coming up. The next question, I don't understand what a time tree is. What games use it? The most obvious use of the time tree is the Magic Screen game, starting with Carnival Queen and running through Bounty and Malibu Beach. On the right-hand side of the glass, there's a list of times that the movement feature will be locked out, beginning with before 4th and running all the way to after 5th. Advancing this unit is key to really getting massive amounts of replays on a Magic Screen game because you can win in multiple colors. Another question was regarding the Magic Pockets unit. The Magic Pockets feature seems like a very unique mechanic. Will there be an allowance for generic playfields to digitally emulate the Magic Pockets movement? My response was, I haven't written it as so. I thought some more about this because that unit is so hard to find. And I also spoke with Jeffrey Lawton about this problem, a person whom I'm very glad to call a friend. And he suggested a Pinball 2000 type system where the balls could be observed to move, though they were stationary underneath. The problem with any virtualized movement from the pockets is that you might as well go full virtual for your playfield. The balls are set in a position that'll block additional balls being shot from landing in a hole. This changes how you steer the ball and how you play the remainder of the game, and that's between 1 and 4 balls. In the end, I decided it was best to use the real hardware for this unit, though it was far more complex than I suspected. Anyone can take my code and make a virtual pockets unit, however. It won't be hard to do. Change the behavior of switch left active and switch right active to remove from self.holes and add to self.holes. Adding that as an option would also be easy. I have the code set to check the Jones plug selector for the playfield installed. Simply check that switch, and if it's not in the right position, do emulation. I might add that on a future pass-through myself. I maintain a notebook with a list of things that I would like to do for the code in the future, and I've gone ahead and added that to my notebook. Whether or not those changes see the light of day in the future is, up to the future. But for now, it's on my list, and I think it'd be kind of an interesting challenge to have a system that could do both, if it so chose. I do see a lot of problem with doing that, because that feature is already confusing to new players, especially. Having to know which combinations will be made and how the balls actually move and interact with each other is something that is not completely intuitive when looking at it. But it would be a fun design challenge, at least. So we'll see if that gets done. I do have other things on the refactor list that are much shorter fuse. Things like adding appropriate search sounds for Magic Screen games, going through all my portioning and making sure that everything is correct once I have my initial pass done, going through and tightening up and playtesting all these new games that I've added to make sure that there's no hugely critical bugs. Adding scorn instruction cards for everything to my little scorn instruction displays. I've been really lax about that. So I've got some work ahead of me, basically. And this will be something that's backburnered for now, but I think it's interesting, so I might go ahead and do that. So, now you're caught up on the Pinside thread. I know there's some folks that don't have Pinside accounts that listen to the show, and others that don't really read Pinside, so I thought those were interesting questions, and hopefully you did too, and they weren't too super technical and boring for the majority of you. But those questions were awesome, and I really enjoyed the mental exercise of answering them. And it's really interesting and illustrates how much more I understand about the games now than I did. For example, as far as those teaser lamps, there was a question about whether or not the steppers could be moving in a way that was advantageous, but the player didn't notice. And my response was that does happen, but rarely. But I couldn't think of an example right away. And then it came to me, the Magic Screen feature unit actually steps twice before you start seeing A, B, C, and D lighting up. And there's no teaser arrows or visible representation of that. It's just the way that it works. And I think that that's the way it works for all the Magic Screen games except for Ballerina, but I don't recall off the top of my head. There are very, very few things like that. Most of the time there's a one-to-one relationship. So like on that selection feature unit, when it steps up and you get the teaser arrow on the right-hand side, that's telling you where the time tree will be if you get the Magic Screen lit. So if that steps all the way up and points to after 5th, well then you might as well put in some nickels and try to get the screen lit, because you have the opportunity to win a whole lot of replays on that particular game. So, almost enough bingo talk. It's only been half an hour so far. Let's talk a little bit about the 20 holes. Those games are really quite different and difficult from a portioning perspective. They build off of the Magic Screen games themselves, which are hugely complex. I really am so enthralled with Don Hooker and his designs, because it's just incredible to think that anyone could come up with these designs mechanically. The game has to do so much calculation in different ways based on the position of the screen. It's just really neat. So on the 20 holes, what's different about those is that they've done away with the regular bingo card. Instead, it's all sectional scoring. So you have a blue section, a yellow section, a red section, and a green section. And these sections correspond to 4 different colors in the odds instead of just 3. And you can win in all 4 at once, if you have the numbers lined up appropriately. Now, they took out 5 of the holes, so there's only 20 holes on the playfield. But at any given time, only 16 of the numbers on the backlash are actually winners. What I mean by that is only 4 numbers are in any given section, and then the 5th number corresponds with what's called a star zone hole, or star zone number. And that star zone only counts towards that particular color section if all the other numbers are lit within that section. So by default, it counts for nothing. This is quite a departure from the way that all the previous games worked. And the star zones themselves can score if you get all 4 star zones at once. So 1 in each color. However, that feature has to be lit for that to count. So if you pull off that feat without the feature lit, it doesn't matter, because it won't work. It's very difficult to do. I only achieved it a small number of times when I owned the Double Up, and I'm looking forward to that challenge again with this new set of games in the multi So I'm starting with Border Beauty, and as far as the portioning goes, what's kind of fascinating about it is that they've changed the way that certain things are awarded, and they've really, really changed the way that extra balls work. It's quite different. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it correctly. It's so vastly different, but we'll see. In testing, just from the console, no graphics yet, it looks like it's fairly trivial to get an extra ball, but I could be wrong. That has certainly happened before. Starting about 4 or 5 games in, they added a 5th mixer. So you already have multiple mixers that the game is running through for different checks and calculations. They added a 5th one, which of course increases the complexity. And they changed the behavior of the Mixer 4 relay, which I talked about before. So I'm going to have to be careful as I go not to make a really silly mistake and allow stuff through Mixer 4 when it should be shutting off. But in any case, I'm excited to get the first of these games done, and the portioning is almost identical for the first 3 to 4 games that are 20-hole. I've already taken a look, and everything from the wire color to the position of the mixers looks like it aligns. So the only thing I really have to check between those first 4 or 5 games are the spotting disc, and make sure that the same number of rivets in the same positions are used from game to game. They're probably not. There's a few other examples where there are games which are very, very close, especially those United games where they were traveling across the world. If you recall, when I was working through those, it was like Mexico, Havana, Hawaii, Tahiti, those kind of place games. The portioning was almost identical, and the only thing that changed were the positions on the spotting disc. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to digging in. It's like a brand new challenge. Again, it has kind of revitalized me, so I'm really excited. We'll see how it goes. So after the tech-heaviest for amusement only podcast that has ever existed, are you ready for the featured game? I'm ready for the featured game. Let's go.
Year of Flipperless.
What was that sound? Oh, welcome to the Year of Flipperless. All right, this is my first in a year-long series about flipperless pinball machines, not of the bingo variety, and just how fun and cool they are with different unique design elements that a lot of people overlook because they see that there are no flippers and figure that the game just isn't going to be fun. You don't need something that rockets a ball back up the playfield in order to have fun, in my opinion. A lot of fun comes from the way the ball moves and the goal that you're attempting to achieve. And the goals for some of these games are actually really very interesting and distinct. When you think about the units and the layout of these different playfields, it's really quite astounding what they were able to achieve with just simple elements. So today's game is an example of that. It is 1938 Exhibit Regatta. And this pretty much exemplifies what I was talking about with simple design and simple layout. Looking at the playfield, there are a variety of bumpers labeled number 1 through 15. And these are passive spring bumpers. You smack into them, and they move a thing on the back glass. Their layout is very interesting, and I'll get to that in a moment. What is also interesting is that they're lit bumpers, which are lighted by 2 different lamps. One is yellow, and one is red. On the back glass, there are 2 different colors, yellow and red, to match those bumpers. There are numbers 1 through 15 in each color, and on the left-hand side, you have the red with the label Lights Out. And on the right-hand side, you have the yellow with the label lights on. And what you're attempting to do, hit the lit bumpers for the color in which you're trying to achieve. This is difficult because each bumper hit randomizes which bumpers are lit. And they can be lit, again, in either red or yellow. So you may be advancing your red when you need to be advancing your yellow, and so forth. The other tricky thing is that this is a sequence game and not a straightforward sequence, meaning if I hit number 1 and it's lit in yellow, then it will advance my yellow by turning on the number 1 on the back glass. But that same bumper will never light another number. It'll only light number 1. So you have to be very particular in how you're plunging, how you're nudging, to make sure that you don't accidentally hit one that you don't need, as it may switch it to another color, or that you don't accidentally rebound down the playfield in a way that you don't want to access one of the bumpers that you do need. If you hit it and it's something that you didn't need, in a worst case scenario, it would swap the color. In a best case scenario, it would randomize the layout of the rest of the playfield and change what you needed to shoot towards. So this looks very tricky by the layout. So let me describe that a little bit so you can get kind of an idea. The numbers 1, 2, 3, and 6 are arranged north, west, east, south, right at the top third of the playfield. Numbers 4 and 5 flank the number 6 further down the playfield with 11 in the center. 4 and 5 have a flag spring in front, so the only way to hit those is from either side. You can go around it, or from the flag spring, which is underneath number 4 and 5 and bouncing up. That will take some quick maneuvering, but even more difficult is the number 6. Number 6 can only be hit if you happen to land on the flag spring in front of number 4 or 5, or you hit the curled spring, which is mounted above number 11 and bounce upwards. There's a curled spring that's mounted above number 6 that prevents you from just hitting it from the side or dead on. That looks very challenging. Below number 11, you have numbers 7 and 8 flanking on the left and right. Again, there's a flag spring, which is in between those and numbers 4 and 5. So you can roll off the tip of the flag spring and land on number 7 or 8. In the center of those and below is number 12. So again, the only way to hit 11 is to rebound from number 7 or 8. You'd have to be going very, very fast indeed, or hitting the double spring above number 12. Looks pretty tough. And then below that, you have arrayed in a V pattern, 9, 13, 15, 14, and 10. Hitting those numbers is easiest as you're going down. Of course, there are pins in the playfield which also direct your movement. So steering the ball is going to be crucial. And doing so without tilting looks very difficult, at least to me. So I would love to play this game. It certainly looks very simple. The artwork on it is quite beautiful, however. The thing which is a little distracting is the bumper caps. So being spring bumpers, these don't have traditional bumper caps as we know them today. They have these screw-on washers, basically, that hold the spring assembly together and keep it in place. And all the numbers except the ones that are straight up the center, that's number 1, 6, 11, 12, and 15, are yellow. Those ones in the center are purple. I just feel like the color doesn't quite match the artwork on the playfield. Also, as there's no score and instruction card available on the IPDB, I'm not certain what the significance of the purple bumpers are. So if anyone knows, I'd love to know, and I'll be happy to report back. But as far as the artwork goes, The cabinet artwork is relatively sparse. This is a game from 1938. However, it does have a stencil, and the stencil is kind of cool. You've got the hint of mountains on the sides and 2 blue stripes with a white stripe in between, and that is representative of the ocean. And I know this because of the front of the game, which has a yacht on it that's participating in the regatta, and then 2 seagulls which are flying away. It's very cool. It's like minimalist and unusual for the time period, so it's really, really neat, I think. The wooden legs on this game, the exhibit legs, are also pretty neat from this time period. They have kind of this ridge that's cut into either side of the leg, so it must be very beautiful to look at, just the leg by itself, which says something right there. But looking at the back glass, at the top you've got Exhibits Regatta, and as was typical at the time, the game name is in quotes. You have lights out on the left and all the red numbers, and those are arrayed in one half of a V. The other half is lights on the right, and that's your yellow. In the bottom left there's a buoy, and that buoy is floating in the ocean, and you have a yacht that is in the midst of a race right in the center of the V, and in the distance you can see another couple yachts that are either further along in the race or something. I worked with a guy once who raced in regattas, and what he had told me about was anytime you saw a buoy, you were supposed to make a turn. So what's interesting is these boats in the distance, maybe they're not even participating in the regatta, but it'd be unusual for that boat not to start making a turn, from what he told me. But I don't know. Looking at the playfield, the artwork is actually really cool. You've got a sun setting, and it's throwing out all these different colors, starting with yellow and working its way up to a pink or a purple near the top. In the very center of the playfield, and going all the way from number 15 all the way up to number 1, is the sail from the yacht, and then the yacht itself. And arrayed in that bottom V, 9, 13, 15, 14, 10, those bumpers, is the bottom of the sunset, the horizon line, and below that is the ocean with seagulls flying near the trough down at the bottom that holds the balls as you finish playing. Just beautiful artwork, and I think it's very cool, especially for the time period. So again, this is just the beginning of the year of Flipperless. And that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Pocket Casts, Stitcher. You can find me on Facebook at For Amusement Only Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Bingo Podcast, or on Twitter also at Bingo Podcast. And you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Year of Flipperless.